This is Keith Price's Curtain Call. Yes, honey. It's Keith Price, and we're back here for another edition of Keith Price's Curtain Call. And I'm so glad you guys are here because, you know, this holiday season, it's really great. I know lots of you are making your plans to come to New York City. And so for the next few episodes, I want to try to present to you some really great theater options for yourselves. For, you know, you're coming to New York City, and I know, you know, you want to go to Hamilton. They want to go to Hamilton, Chris. They do.
Of course. Who doesn't?
You know what I mean? But let's be honest. You're not going to get a ticket.
Not even close.
No. If you
stand in the cold.
Exactly. You can get tickets for next year this time if you get them now. That's how good it is. So, you know, it's not about them coming to see Hamilton if you can't, but there's so many other really great pieces that are being done around the city in different venues and in different parts of the city that are free of the craziness that is Times Square. And I'm so glad because today I have this wonderful young man who has, and I say young man because I feel like I am older than you. I think if I remember correctly from my notes. And it's not a way to be condescending. It's just I really feel old.
No, I'll take it.
I just feel so old.
Sure.
But he's adorable. Chris Gethard is here with me. And his one-man show, I love how you describe it as also really trying to stay true to the world of stand-up, which I really appreciate a lot. His piece, Career Suicide, is playing at the Lindgren Theater at the Culture Project here in New York City. And it's one of these small off-Broadway houses that I feel very excited because, you know, you and I have just meeting today, you and I have had something in common already because I was very lucky to do a show in that very same space. And so when I walked in and saw the way that they had it all set up, I was having like flashbacks like, oh my God, the dressing room's right downstairs. This is so cool. And his piece is a very honest, very revealing thing for a comedian to do, which that's a piece about it that I really, really love. Chris Gethard, you talk about, you know, your issues with depression and how it has taken you on several journeys that we've discovered in your show.
Yeah.
How are you, baby? How you doing?
I'm okay. I'm feeling a lot better these days.
Yeah?
Yeah. I can talk about it on stage now, and in general, I'm feeling all right. Feeling pretty good about the show, and happy that it seems to be connecting with people. It feels very nice, and coming from a comedy background, you don't always get people saying they felt like an emotional connection. It's more about the laughs. So to kind of do a thing where people are consistently telling me that it connects on that level, it's been very, very flattering and gratifying, and I'm very appreciative of the ability to do it.
I love it. So, you know, you have a very honest journey in this piece. When he, you know, opens up, it's, you know, you're kind of sitting there thinking, oh, we're having this cute monologue. He's got couches up in the front of the area. They're very, very relaxing, which I'm glad that I did not take one of those seats because I just have, not that it'd be you, it's just like, oh, it's just so comfortable. I would have nodded off and felt terrible. But, but I sat up in my seat when I was watching you go through your life and the things that you were so brave to share. How did you decide that you were going to be this honest?
Well, I didn't really intend it. I think I've always been known as someone who's pretty honest in my work, and I've like mentioned, you know, like there's a lot of comedians who are depressed, and I've mentioned that over the years, and I think that's been a sort of piece of the puzzle for me. But I was actually on the road with Mike Birbiglia, another comic who has done a number of off-Broadway pieces, and
a lot of people, you know, the Orange is the New Black, they might remember.
Oh, yeah. People Sleepwalk with Me.
Come on.
Don't Think Twice, the new music, which I have a small part in. The new movie, rather.
Come do my show, Mike. Hey.
I'll put in work. Tell
him I said hey.
But he asked me, he's like, I've heard you tell some jokes about that stuff, but what are the real stories? And I told him this story that now is one of the centerpieces of the show about a time I crashed a car. And I told him that, thinking I was, you know, that's a story like my family doesn't know. Nobody really knows all the details of it. And I was really opening up to him because we're very close. And as soon as I finished, he was like, dude, that's hilarious. Tell that on stage. And I was like, no, it's a bad idea. But he was like, you know, if you can get that to connect, like you got something really special on your hands. And I took that as a great challenge and spent a couple of years really going on stage, trying to get the audience on board with these different pieces of material. And it was very encouraging. Like real early on, I noticed like some of it was getting laughs, some of it wasn't. That's okay. But I started noticing that people were like waiting around after the shows to talk to me and kind of encourage me to keep going or tell me that they identified with it. And that became a very motivating thing as well. So that's kind of the shorthand. And then, yeah, did it around town quietly and toured it a little to keep working it out. Did the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, and now we're off Broadway. And, you know, once Judd Apatow offered to produce it, he had heard about the show, and that really accelerated things for sure.
I was waiting to see how long it was going to take for one of us to get it in there, because I found that to be one of the most interesting things ever, because, you know, his comedy style has really kind of grown in a very interesting way, in that he's allowed all kinds of expression in terms of, you know, who gets to be funny, you know what I mean, in terms of the stuff that he puts out as of late. And to have him sign on to this must have been a really big thrill, because, you know, the one thing I can say about you, having just seen the show just a couple of weeks ago, is that you're very honest about who you are. Like, this is what you're getting.
Yeah.
You
I
know?
mean, I can't hide it. I look like this.
You know,
And I
it's like,
sound like this, and
he's just
I am what I am.
He's adorable nerd kind of guy. He's got that going on. You're married.
Yeah.
You're living. You know, you're working as an artist, as a performing artist.
Hanging on.
Yeah, and it's like
living in Queens. I grew up in Jersey. I'm nothing too special.
Well, see, you know, but here you are saying that you're nothing so special, but your story resonates with people who you don't even know. Yeah,
it's been very cool and very head spinning and flattering. And I'm like not used to doing something this intimate and this revealing. And it's been like I get a lot of feedback, emails and Facebook messages, and some that are really very encouraging, and some from people who have had some really hard times, who are telling me to keep going, that I'm speaking something that sounds true to them. And that's like such a huge motivating thing, because as somebody who dealt with this stuff, a lot of the show is about how hard it was to deal with this specifically when I was young, and you know, didn't really want to admit that I was kind of losing it and didn't know how to talk to people about it. People don't necessarily want to talk about it. And to get some feedback from people who say either I've dealt with that or I've lost someone to it, and you're speaking to it in a way that rings true. It feels like, you know, it's this very odd thing to realize. Like, I've made a lot of comedy before. I'm sure after this run comes and goes, I'll make a lot of comedy after it, but I'm pretty certain this is the thing that will have the most impact in a non-comedic way that I'll ever do. So that's just so eye-opening and strange to realize, and it definitely carries some responsibility with it. But I'm happy to go there, and happy to maybe make the conversation a little easier for people who are coming after me than it was for me. You know?
Well, I mean, because clearly, when talking to Chris Gethard here with me about his show Career Suicide, that's playing at the Lynn Redgrave Theater and at the Culture Project here in New York City, downtown.
Yeah.
It's very hip.
Bleecker and Lafayette, baby.
Oh, come on, man.
NoHo. They call that NoHo.
NoHo, that's right.
Yeah.
It's selling his wares on NoHo.
Oh,
it's kind of hot, right? And really taking people like me who don't understand necessarily how depression can truly affect you, especially as a creative person, and how sometimes maybe to recognize the signs that you might actually be depressed, because that was one of the things that I took. No, I mean, I thought about some of the things that you were going through,
and
the sequence and how they were, and I was thinking to myself, like, oh my God, like, is that what that is? Maybe that's what I need to explore about myself. And it was great because I still got to laugh.
Yeah.
You know, you have this really wonderful relationship with Chris Gethard does. And we're talking about his show Career Suicide, and you talk about your relationship with your therapist.
Yeah.
And how seemingly unorthodox that relationship is.
Yeah, she doesn't play by the rules. It's never been her thing. And
yet
I love it.
Yeah, but clearly worked for you, because there's this wonderful moment that you talk about. I believe it was like you were standing like on you were looking at the city skyline from Jersey,
From Weehawken,
from
yeah,
Weehawken,
the
and you were
very
talking
glamorous Weehawken, New Jersey.
about where you were, and in that moment of talking to your therapist and what you said to her about what you were contemplating doing, and she said to you basically, "Can you wait until Thursday?"
Yeah,
And your response was, "Yeah, I think I can." And my partner, who has worked a lot as a therapist, said, as much as you were talking about her up to that point, he said that she clearly knows you very well,
yeah,
to know that that was going to be something that would have made you do the right thing.
yeah. It's a long relationship. It's
Yeah.
funny because I think word has spread of this show in the sort of psychiatric care community, the mental health community, because I've had a lot of shrinks come through and a lot of counselors and therapists, and it's very evenly divided. Some of
Yeah.
them are very much like, that's dangerous, the rules are in place for a reason, and then I've had other people say the opposite. Actually, a very good friend of my wife's is a psychiatrist, and he came and saw the show, and he was like, that's not safe.
Yeah.
That is not good treatment. The rules are in place for a reason. And then he called me a few days later, and he says, you know what, like, been thinking a lot about it, and your shrink breaks all the rules, but in doing so, she gets to the place that all the rules exist to protect. So he's like, I'm actually okay with it, having thought about it.
You're like,
yeah.
Dude, you already paid for your ticket.
Yeah,
So-
big time.
So
But that's one of the big things I think about with the show is, like, I'm not trying to get on a soapbox and preach. I really just try to tell my own experiences.
Right.
I try to make it funny so that maybe slices through the awkwardness. And I think a lot about, like, a lot of people have said, like, oh, well, you're like an advocate for mental health care now. And I'm like, I don't know that that's true. I think I'm just getting up and talking about stuff that really happened to me. But I do try to make clear, like, if whatever works, like, I have too many people in my life who have been like, oh, I tried therapy once. I didn't like the doctor and I never went back. And it's like, well, you wouldn't do that with a dentist.
exactly.
You wouldn't
go
let
to a
your
new
teeth
one.
fall out of your head. You'd
Exactly.
shop around. And I try to make it clear of, like, I totally get why some people are weirded out by therapy, antidepressants, all those things. I get why it's uncomfortable, but also, like, just whatever works, whatever you got to do to just keep going, find yourself happy. That's what I'm an advocate for. And that's really the only message I'm trying to send, the only point I'm trying to make is, like, just take care of yourself, do what it takes, find the people who work for you. I'm not a public crusader in any way.
Right.
It is a comedy show, but my shrink is really, like, she's a strange example of, like, I tried a therapist who played by the rules. It bugged me out. I
Right.
didn't like it.
Right.
Talk about that in the show too. Like,
exactly. That was a
Yeah.
very heartbreaking story as well.
Yeah, I'm an unorthodox person, so orthodox treatment didn't fit me well, and I found somebody who's really stepped up hard over the years, and I'm happy about it.
Well, I mean, and as we all are, because again, thanks to her efforts with you, that's the reason why you're able to sit here and have this conversation with me,
Yeah,
which I think is very
Big time.
groovy.
yeah, I'm into it.
So, when you were rolling around, in your, were you listening to the Smiths? Is that what it was?
Big time.
Love
Me some Morrissey, that's for sure.
That's right. That's what it was. Just like, oh my God, how old is this kid? Because I was thinking, I remember those moments.
Yeah. Well, the Smiths are a band that I think people keep finding them. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not about when the Smiths put out their albums. It's about when you find
you
their
find
albums.
them.
If you find them when you're around 14, 15, 16, they still stick with you for life. I found them freshman year of high school, and I was like, okay,
This guy's talking to me.
game changer.
I love that. And and for you, it's sort of like that whole experience. Did you see where you are now as being a part of that picture then?
No, I am very surprised. I mean, I'm surprised that things turned out okay, let alone that they're going, like, decently well. But as far as being an artist goes, that never felt like a real possibility to me. I just didn't grow up in a family that was, my mom's parents got off the boat from Ireland. Like, art wasn't so much, they had other things to worry about,
feeding the 9,000 kids.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
The whole immigrant reality.
yeah. And my dad, his whole family, like, they're all from, Newark, New Jersey, like, blue collar people. Like, art was not a thing that seemed possible. So it was very, very very much I am not in a reality that I could have predicted when I was a kid. I didn't even know the mechanics of how there could be a career. It's funny, I had a teacher in high school who taught the drama classes, and she told me to take her class mostly because always like, I was kind of like just like a smart ass, I guess. And she was like, you should take my class. And she just did all improv. And I was like, whoa. And she was
Right.
like, yeah, maybe it might be a good thing that you are who you are. Like, she was the first one who wasn't like yelling at me for making wisecracks. She was like, no, you're funny. That could be
That
good.
could be good.
And that really was the first time that I realized, like, oh, this is a thing that's okay. And then,
Wow.
yeah, and still didn't buy into it for many years. But
I love that. You know, it's so funny. I'm talking with Chris Gethard here from the wonderfully raved one person experience that I have to say was very changing for me. His piece, Career Suicide, over at the Lynn Redgrave Theater at the Culture Project. Um, and again, as you were talking about, you didn't get that connection, but it was because of this one teacher who kind of turned it around for you in your thought process. And I was thinking about how improv gives you a sense of freedom that you don't have in someone's Broadway show or in someone's play. You get this release of everything that makes you who you are.
yeah.
When you found that place with that work, doing improvisational work, is that what fueled your movement towards comedy as something?
Yeah, I definitely got pretty addicted to it.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I started at a place called the Upright Citizens Brigade in 2000, so 16 years ago. And it was very small then. Now
Okay.
it's a well-known place, but back then, it was just a lot of weirdos.
All right. So I'm going to share a story with you.
Okay.
Because we're friends now.
Yeah.
At this point, Chris Gethard.
Uh-huh.
So as I was reading in your bio, you were talking about the Upright Citizens Brigade space in 2000 that you guys worked out of, being on 22nd Street,
yeah, between 6th and 7th.
161 West 22nd Street to be exact.
Uh-huh.
Because you know what was there before that?
One of the most notorious houses of sin in all of New York City.
And guess who worked at that place as the bouncer, DJ, house mother, MC?
You did?
Yeah.
Oh, we have a lot of talking to do off mic.
Chris Gethard. I don't see. Should I keep it in? We'll have to edit it out. What do you think?
That's up to you.
I mean, you know, it's because I don't want it to be overindulgent because we're really here talking about Chris Gethard's show, Career Suicide. But we had a really fun tangent, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, big time.
and you know, it's so funny. I love that. But I, you know, the show is really great because it's the way that you opened up that I find, like how you were able to walk through what you were walking through to get to the place where you're able to now put it out on stage. How long was that time frame from the day that you had your first real therapy session with your therapist that you're still with now? How long was that process for you to get through to the place where you were able to start putting words to pages and sorting it out that way, like sorting it out through the work that you needed to do and then doing the actual work to make a show?
Sure.
What was that time frame like?
Let's see, because I have dabbled in talking about it to a degree, but this show really puts it on the table for real. And I had been seeing her for 7 years before I ever told any stories from this show on stage. So it was
A long time.
yeah, it was over a half decade of just really working on stuff, and it's still not easy. It's been very odd because working on the show, there's some parts that I feel very empowered over, where I'm like, oh, I get to be the boss of this for the first time in my life. That feels great. And then there's other stuff where I'm like, wow, this is like churning a lot of emotion to the surface that I didn't know was there.
Well, I was going to ask you, you know,
Yeah.
because you're telling these, you know, very, very hard stories about where you were emotionally during certain situations that you found yourself in, where you made what could be conceived as bad choices.
Oh,
if people
I
wanted
think
to.
most people would.
Well, you know, I don't want to put a judgment on it because
No, that's very kind of
those
you. But
choices that you made are the reason why you're sitting here today.
yes, true.
So
Yeah.
listen to me. See, this is age.
Wisdom, they call that.
Wisdom and stuff. but you had to go through a lot to get to that place. Do you find that that's made your comedy even more honest?
Well, I think so. I think it also put a little bit of a chip on my shoulder to to not just do traditional stuff. I think I felt like, no, I got to say this. I think at the end of the day, like, it makes me very angry to think back and remember how much I felt like I wasn't supposed to talk about this stuff. And I think I do have a chip on my shoulder from that makes me want to really sort of stand up and say, like, no, let's shout it to the hilltops. The other thing I would say is the fact that I was going through so much hard stuff really did kind of impede my ability to have a regular career. It really did get in the way. It was very hard. I was never good at socializing, networking. You'd put me in a room where the pressure was on, I would crumble, I'd have panic attacks, I'd skip auditions because I got scared. So all that stuff did kind of put me in a corner where I had to consciously decide, like, if I'm going to do this, I really have to do it my way, because other people's way, it just kind of messes with me too much, messes with my head, like it's breaking me. I get too freaked out. So I've really kind of walked my own path and built my own career. And I think a lot of that is because I was kind of an odd person, and because I had a lot of things that were standing between me and traditional success. Like, I got so many friends in comedy who they can go into a room and schmooze and actually have something come out of it. And I just go in there and sit in silence. And people are like, oh, we heard you were talented. Why are you just sitting there? And I'm like, no, I know, I get it. So
you're sitting here like a wallflower.
Yeah. So I've built it. I've had to build it my own way, and I've had to build it in a way that fits my comfort zone. And that has, after many years, led to, knock on wood, that it'll continue. But really, like, the past 2 years, I feel like, okay, like, I've got my head above water. I'm living. I'm happy, I'm stable, all these things, but it took a very long time to get there. A lot of it was because of these issues, but I don't think I'd trade them, because I have something very unique. And I think if I had wound up just in a writer's room or on a sitcom, there's a lot of experiences that I wouldn't have to share now, and wouldn't have, there's a part of me that's like, I wouldn't have had to deal with it, but then there's also a part of me that's like, well, then I wouldn't be in a place where I actually feel like an artist who gets to express something and say something unique. So,
and have a career and have a bit of a life.
Yeah, for now at least. I mean, this could all dry up. We'll see what I'm doing in 8 weeks. Talk to me in February. We'll see. The run ends January 8th. So talk to me on January 10th.
You see?
January 10th. We'll see how I'm feeling.
Exactly. We'll see. But now when you're thinking about coming to New York now, because we've got Thanksgiving, we've got Christmas, we've got Hanukkah, we've got Kwanzaa, we've got, was it the King's Day or something like that?
King's Day.
Something like that. I think on the 6th of January.
Okay.
Like, that's like the official 12th day of Christmas.
Okay.
But something's supposed to happen on that day. I don't know. Catholics.
Yeah, I'm not a good enough Catholic to know.
So you should know, right?
Yeah. I have fled the Catholicism. Oh, boy.
Man, if that wasn't the source of a lot of other issues for you.
I mean, what a surprise that an Irish Catholic guy is doing a show about his anxiety and depression. I'm really fitting the cliche on that one. Big alcohol stretch right in the middle of the show. The show might as well just be called Being Catholic.
I think, though, for sad, twisted queens like me, I feel like you should have had like an imaginary gay side trek that ended up someplace really awful, but then in actuality you wake up like Bobby Ewing at the end of Dallas, where it was really just all a dream.
Okay.
But it was like you took us there to some place that we really all shouldn't have gone.
Yeah.
And then you were like, no, but it didn't really happen. It was just like this crazy.
Like I've got
I'm
some
just
rewrites.
saying. I'm just saying. I was just thinking, if you want to freshen,
sure,
just, you could,
Sure.
Me telling Chris Gethard, who's got his own show going on, Hello Career Suicide, at the Lynn Redgrave Theater at the Culture Project. He don't need me, but that's all right. That's all good. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Because we both have the Harmony Theater in common.
Uh-huh.
We both have the Lynn Redgrave Theater, which at the time when I was there, it was the Pearl Theater. Pearl at Culture Space.
Sure.
Yeah, it was all part of that same thing. So we have that in common. So even not knowing you out in the world, our 6 degrees of separation have brought us to this moment. Isn't that fabulous?
I'm into it.
I'm so grooved about that. That's like, how cool is that?
I'm into it. Yeah, big
Man,
time.
but
Happy to be here.
Chris Gethard, I tell you, this story it's really great to see how we can, as artists, use what we think is probably the most painful pieces of our lives and not only find a way to get through them for ourselves, but then to be able to turn them around and make them work for us. Like, that's the part that I think is what makes your show so genius.
Yeah, thank you. That's nice. And I definitely want to be as honest as I can, and I want to put the real story out there. And the one thing I have in my head is like, I want to make a show that I wish my parents could have seen when I was 16 and really messed up. Like I don't.
Yeah.
I'm really happy when other depressed people are like, oh, I really identify with that. But more so, I'm like, I would love it if some people who are raising kids see it and are like, maybe I should just like take it easy.
Yeah.
Just like
or having a little bit of understanding of what it may have been like.
Yeah.
And looking at your child and thinking what it can be like for them.
Yeah.
The difference that kind of intervention could make for them would be genius.
I think so. And it's like, it's definitely like the idea of being depressed or the idea of going a little crazy or suffering from this stuff. It's still, I think, by and large treated as a thing of like, let's like keep that behind closed doors
Right.
and just try to figure it out. And that was a very damaging thing for me. So I'm like, no, I think I'll get on a stage and not just talk about it, but make jokes about it. And if you're uncomfortable with that, you're the person I want to see this show the most because your discomfort is probably going
to feed on your discomfort.
Well, it's like the people who are uncomfortable with it are probably the ones who are like, yeah, don't talk about that stuff. And it's like, no, we're going to talk about it.
Talk about it, and you're going to like it.
And I'm going to talk about all of it. The sexual side effects, the physical side effects.
There was a moment that you had, a very descriptive moment, and I don't want to give it away, about it was about hemorrhoids.
Oh, yeah.
And I was just like, wow, I don't think in all of my days, even the many years I spent working in a hospital, have I ever had it just broken down.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you just broke that shit down.
Well, it's really funny, too, because, like, for me, you can imagine, like, coming from the comedy world, people are used to stuff that's a little dirty at times.
Yeah.
That by the standards of a comedy club, that is not, so bad. But now this is a theater piece, and it is, and it's not just, if people come out, it's not just a stand-up show. We have worked hard on it, and it's very much not just a stand-up show, but there are stretches that will go a little blue. And now my audience we got a really nice review in the Times and the New Yorker. Like, some of those people are coming out to check it out. They are not used to hemorrhoid material. The people read Nisherwood. They're not used to a 5-minute bit about what happens when you have hemorrhoids go a little haywire.
Man. And again, like I said, life-changing. Thank you for that.
Well, that's the real...
It's the real story.
Once we get on the other side of the depression, it's mostly a hemorrhoid-driven show. Really, that's what I'm trying to take a stand on the most. Let's stop the stigmatized conversation surrounding mental health, but more importantly, hemorrhoids.
When you get the piles.
Oh, boy. Ooh, vicious, brutal. It went on for years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Watch that Adderall, kids. Don't mess around with that Adderall. Really be careful with the Adderall.
Man, but it's so funny because people don't get it. They don't understand what they do to themselves when they do all of that to their bodies. Because
Yeah.
I feel like I have ADD, so I should be using this pill. It's like, you don't really know why you're using that pill, and you don't know what it does to you.
Yeah, and it's talking about this stuff, I do feel a little responsibility to say, like, you really need to listen to a doctor on that, and you need to communicate with the doctor. Like, a big part of my problem with Adderall was that I was taking way too much and having fun with it and not telling my doctor that, and it was not good. And people, a lot of people are like, I don't know, antidepressants, I don't know if they're for me. And I get it, but it's also like, well, if you have a good doctor, they'll put you on stuff that'll work and not mess up your life and not mess up your creativity, all those other things that people worry about.
I was going to ask you about that because I feel like, as a comedian, especially where you draw a lot of your comic energy from, at least naturally, the natural resources for your comic energy comes from a life lived.
Yeah.
So, during that period when you were creating and your life was kind of a, you know, roller coaster out of control type thing, the art that came from that period must have been wildly interesting because your personal art might have been wildly interesting versus the commercial art that you wound up doing because
Yeah.
you were working both places. You were able to kind of have
Yeah.
that split. When you find that place where you're having to decide as you're creating, like you're creating something for SNL skit or you're creating it for your own TV show or your own podcast and things like that versus when you're doing it for other people, I should say. That's what I meant to say. The other people meaning you, but then for the folks that are actually giving you money. How difficult is it then for you to find the right measure to get that commercial project right? Because I think that, again, when you're living with all that stuff that you were going through
Yeah.
and it not being controlled,
Yeah.
how hard was it to focus?
Well, it was really weird because
I don't know why that just came to me. Like, it just felt like that would be really just kind of fucked.
it was strange. It was strange to be like totally, like I remember a year where I was probably at one of my most sort of messed up low points. And meanwhile, I booked a national Target commercial. So it's like, it's like a Christmas themed Target commercial. And I'm on it.
Great.
Me and this girl in like a domestic scene, and then I'm home and I can't get off the couch, and I haven't changed my clothes in 3 days, and I'm just crying. So it's like really weird to have that balance. But I would say overall that.
But you did the gig, hey.
I did. You got to show up for work, right?
Hello.
That's functioning, they call it. Functioning. But you know what? It's a thing that I've thought so long and hard about because for many years I kind of resisted getting my stuff treated because I thought, oh, this is part of what makes me interesting. This is part of what makes me engaging on stage. This is part of what makes me funny or what gives me my own type of ideas. And I really regret that. That's one of my biggest regrets, actually, because I would actually go so far as to say that nothing in my career really got moving until I was medicated. And that it hit a point where I was like, oh, I really need the pills. I guess I need to take them. And if it makes me not funny, it'll make me not funny, but I got to be safe. And instead, it actually allowed me to really buckle down and focus and make some choices and strategize. And, there's times I remember where I'd come up with ideas that I thought were like the most incredible ideas. And then I'd look at my notebook and be like, oh, I was in a manic fit. This makes zero sense. This doesn't even make sense. So why am I so worried about hanging on to this? And,
right.
And once I really got my head together is actually when things started moving for me. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen with everybody. I'm sure there's some people who really do believe that medications in particular might kill their drive. But in my experience, that was nothing but a myth, and I think it's a very dangerous myth. And so for me, the commercial stuff really clicked once I got treated. And not even the really cool thing was like, it wasn't even like the traditional definition of commercial stuff. It was like, oh, I'm able to like strategize and build my own thing now because I have my head together. And that was very eye-opening. I look back with great regret that I resisted for romanticized artistry rooted in sadness. I avoided treatment. And really the only thing that happened was I was just less happy and more in danger than I needed to be for a longer stretch than was required. So I really regret it.
Wow. Well, I'm sad that you regret it, but also know that those choices are what have you here today.
Yeah.
So, it's sort of like, as you were saying, during that period where you were romanticizing, the not taking the medication or not getting the treatment. It's that when you look back at it, it's that same kind of romanticism of that period. It's like, because if the capacity to do it differently had happened, you would have done it differently.
For sure. Everything happened because it was supposed to. And both my wife and my mother, who having seen the show, are very important people in my life. They have both said to me, it's really hard to, like, my mom actually wrote me a letter a couple of years ago, and she said, I see that with your work, you're starting to help people. And she was like, I've often thought about how I wish I could have like made things a little easier for you, but now I can kind of let that go because everything you went through means that you're helping people. So I don't think I'd want to change that at that point.
Right.
And that, you can imagine, was very emotional for me to read.
And
For
hard,
sure.
it's certainly hard for her
Yeah.
to own up to.
Yeah, very much so. Very
Which
much
is,
so.
but then, but that's the genius of it, because it's allowing you to continue to do what you're doing.
Yeah, definitely.
Which is great.
Definitely.
Making people laugh, first and foremost, and getting to deal with your stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're right. Like, again, what did you say, January 10th?
January 8th.
8th is the last show.
Yeah.
But like the 10th is when we should be looking for you.
Oh, yeah. See how I'm feeling then.
Where are you going to go?
Yeah.
You'll be in the middle of Queens in January, though.
Oh, yeah. Well, if I wasn't depressed before.
You're going to be fine. Are you working on anything else for yourself?
Well, I have a TV show that I've done for a bunch of years, and I'm waiting to see if that gets to come back. And I have a podcast called Beautiful Anonymous that's been really a very fun thing in my life. So I always just try to keep busy, and but most of it is just focusing on this show and, getting used to. It was 8 times a week. Now it's 6 times a week, which is a little more reasonable. Talking to strangers about your different suicide attempts 8 times a week, it was really wearing on me, and so I'm really just trying to focus on this and get it right. And this show is very special to me, and I really just want to it's funny because it's like, you get to a point where you've done it. At this point, I've done it, dozens and dozens and dozens of times, and the temptation or is that maybe you start to phone it in. But with this one, I'm like, no, because I can never do that, because if there's one person out there who's going to get something out of it, I got to really make sure I just like hit it right in the guts. So this show it's hard to focus on anything else.
But that's wonderful to hear you say, Chris Gethard, who's in his wonderful show Career Suicide at the Lynn Redgrave Theater at the Culture Project, where you're telling the story of your life. You're putting a big chunk of your life out for people to view, peruse, judge. And by doing it multiple times a week and reliving that multiple times a week, it does get harder. But I love what you just said about how, you still have to go and give it everything you have because of that one person that might get something out of that.
Yeah. And also definitely if anybody gets anything out of it. And also it's sensitive stuff. Like I've gotten Facebook messages two times during this run from people who lost children to suicide, who were saying, that show really, I'm glad you're doing it, and that means a lot to me. But it's like, right, if I let this one go onto autopilot, there's people who have really been affected by this stuff, and it's like you can't make a comedy show out of this stuff and not really go 100% every time, because it's just disrespectful, and I never want to do that. I never want to feel like I'm exploiting this stuff or not putting my whole heart into it, because if I am, it's just really disrespectful for anybody who's dealt with it.
Well, again, for those who are experiencing this for themselves every day, if they can get the opportunity to see this show, I would love for them to see it, just because you kind of certainly show people that there's a way out of it. It's a constant battle, but look at what's on the other side if you really make that effort or energy to put it that way. That's so cool of you.
It feels good. At the very least, you'll feel slightly less alone in it. I can promise you that. Even if you don't see any solutions on the horizon, you'll at least be like, that guy's been as messed up as I have been.
And for those of us who were sitting there going, sometimes I feel that way too. It's good to know that is something to add into the equation for myself, to take a moment and be aware that might be what's happening, and maybe take the energy to be forewarned. You know what I mean?
There you go.
So thank you for that.
My pleasure. Thanks for checking out the show.
Chris Gethard. How can they find you online?
Well, for info on the show, you can go to careersuicideshow.com, and for me, you can go to chrisgeth.com.
Geth, that's right.
Yeah, and then I'm on Twitter and Instagram and all those things.
Well, I'll be following you and checking in with you, hopefully, from time to time to see how this is going. Because, again, like I said, if you're coming to New York City and you're looking for something to add to your theatrical roundings that's a little bit off of the beaten path, but equally as stimulating, equally as good, then you need to do Chris Gethard's Career Suicide at the Lynn Redgrave Theater and add that to some part of your visit. It's fabulous. He's 6 shows a week. You're in, out in 90 minutes. I used to not be a fan of that whole idea because I kept thinking, you need to give me more for my ticket money. But you know what? I appreciate in a monologue 90 minutes. Like, it's enough for both of us.
That's
you know
good.
what I mean? Like,
I don't know if I have too much more to give at the end of
like-
that. I don't know if I have too much more to give.
it's like we get it. All right, you've been through some stuff.
Especially with this one.
It's like,
Please.
you've been through some stuff. It is now we're hitting the 2-hour mark.
Yeah. I would love that though if somebody was like, this show is too short. I want to hear about at least 3 more suicide attempts.
I feel like I'm not getting enough suicide.
You're shortchanging me. You need to tell me about other times that you were at complete rock bottom.
Come on. This is enough. You're holding out. Because you know what? There are people in the world that are that way.
Oh, I'm sure.
That's why we can laugh at it, because it's true.
I'm sure.
We know it's true. Well,
Yeah.
Chris, thank you so much.
Thank you. What a fun conversation.
This was really, really great. And again, like I said, chrisgeth.com.
Mm-hmm.
That's where they can find all they can about you. And again, come to New York, come see Career Suicide, and get your life, as the kids would say, because it really did I had a really good moment about it from not only a personal place, but also from an artistic place. So thank you for
It's so kind.
for you putting your art out there for all of us. All right.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much. And we'll be back.